What's up, guys? I'm Kel, Red Zone MTG, and today I have another, as I try to get in focus, Commander deck strategy video. Today we are obviously covering Sram Senior Edificer. This is actually my favorite, currently, Voltron build. It is obviously mono white, and it features a lot of artifacts. We got swords, we got hammers, we got boots, we got nets, we got it all. And without further ado, let's jump into it and start talking about this really cool dwarf bro. So obviously our commander and general of the deck is Sram Senior Edificer. He is a legendary creature, dwarf advisor. Our advisor is somewhat relevant now, but not for this deck. He costs 1 of any and a white, really good low 2-drop cost. He's a 2/2 and he says, whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. And we definitely have more of some of those than others, but we do run at least one of each of those in the deck. In fact, we run about, I want to say 30-ish to 35% of the deck is those things, maybe even up to 40%, because it's a really big deal. But I think this deck is actually one of my more competitive decks, because it's very fast and it's really easy to recover from board wipes and such. So let's get into some of those really cool aura and or artifact and or equipment cards. The first 4 that I want to talk about are basically my favorite equipment cards ever made, with these I think are my favorite equipment cards ever made. I don't have the Sword of Body in mind because it is not quite good in Commander. I mean, I do have a copy of it. And that's basically because milling your opponent for a little bit and getting a 2/2 wolf isn't as good as some of the other stuff we could be doing. And sometimes milling your opponent without having a mill strategy can actually, you know, give them some benefits, especially if you're playing something like, against something like Muldrotha or Marin. But yeah, let's talk about these really cool swords. So Sword of Fire and Ice is a classic. It is a artifact equipment for 3 of any. It says equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and blue, and all these cards do that. They all give +2/+2 and protection from 2 different colors. And this one says whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of Fire and Ice deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and you draw a card, and it has an equip cost of 2. That is super sweet. So you get to ping off low power, low toughness dudes, and you get to draw cards, which is excellent. The next one is Sword of Light and Shadow, and this one's a little bit better in Commander, but I mean, drawing cards is always good. Also, 3-drop, artifact equipment, +2/+2, and protection from white and black. It says whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you gain 3 life, which is, you know, it's alright, but you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which is really cool. I mean, this is one of the only recursion engines that we have in the whole deck. We do have some other ones, but this is a really good one. And, you know, equips for 2. All of these have the same mana cost and the same equip cost. Next we have Sword of Feast and Famine, and this is probably the best one for Commander. And by probably, I mean definitely. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and green, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, and you get to untap all of your lands. That is super sweet. You can do really big explosive turns with this. It basically, you know, doubles your mana, you know, just in terms of, you know, lands, but we're not running a whole lot of mana rocks in this deck, so this basically doubles our mana. It is super sweet. And then last and somewhat least, we have Sword of War and Peace. This one is, you know, kind of a life gain and a damage dealing card. Doesn't really do a lot of the flashy stuff that the other one does, but it gives +2/+2 and protection from red and white. And whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of War and Peace deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in his or her hand, so it kind of like Storm Seekers them. And then you gain 1 life for each card in your hand. So that's pretty good. You deal them some damage, gain some life. It can punish some pretty greedy players who have like 20 cards in their hand. I've actually seen that happen before. So yeah, it's not the worst, but it's not the best either. Next up, we have my suite of 0 costing equipment, and that's actually really important because, you know, every time you play an equipment with Sram, you get a draw card, and, you know, having a cost of 0 is excellent. So we have Paradise Mantle. This is probably the best one of the bunch because it's the most useful. Obviously, it costs 0. It's an equipment. It equips for 1, and it says, equipped creature has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, which is very sweet. And then we have a bunch of not as good ones. These ones are all just kind of like stat bonuses, and they're not very great. So I'm going to go over quickly. So this one is +0/+3 Vigilance, and it has an equip cost of 3. This one is +0/+3 Vigilance, and has a equip cost of 3. This one is +0/+3 and has a equip cost of 3. Doesn't give Vigilance like the other 2. This one is in Russian, but it is +0/+2, gives Reach, and has an equip cost of 2. And then the Bone Saw just gives +1/+0 and has equip cost of 1. We don't really care about the equip effects all that much. It's just the fact that they cost 0 is very good. Basically, Any equipment that costs 0, I'm probably going to put it in this deck. Next up, we have a fat stack of 1 cost equipment, starting with probably one of the best equipment ever made, Skull Clamp. You probably already know what this does. +1, -1. Whenever the creature dies, you get to draw 2 cards, and it has an equip cost of 1. I mean, it's an equipment deck. We're definitely running Skull Clamp. Next, we have Shuko. It's not quite as good. Well, it's not that great, but just costs 1 to play, which is really good for Sram, and it has equip cost of 0. Just +1/+0. Not a big deal, but pretty good. Next, we have Bone Splitter. Pretty iconic. +2/+0. Equip cost of 1. Cost 1 to play. Not too bad, but you know, it is what it is. Dark Steel Axe. Similar to the Bone Splitter, except this one has Indestructible, and it has an equip cost of 2 instead of 1. Next, we have the Bloodforged Battle Axe. We have our trio of axes there. This one also gives +2/+0. It seems that's what all axes do. However, this one says whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a token that is a copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe. This card is super spicy. I love it a lot. One of my favorite new equipment cards and from the last couple years. Next we have, this is Ghostfire Blade, I believe it's called. It's also alright, you know, it gives the creature +2/+2. It has equip cost of 3, and the equip cost is reduced by 2 if you're equipping it to a colorless creature. So, you know, an artifact creature or an Eldrazi or something like that. But once again, I mean, all of the costs, all of these are really good just because they cost 1. They basically also read and draw a card when they come into play. Next up we have Explorer's Scope. This is some pseudo ramp with Sram. It says whenever the equipped creature attacks, put the top card, or look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you can put it into the battlefield tap. So that's pretty cool. And it has an equip cost of 1. Next we have the Flayer Husk. This is a living weapon. So obviously it costs 1, it has equip cost of 2. The equipped creature gets +1/+1, but it says when the equipment enters the battlefield, you put a 0/0 black germ creature token onto the field, and then you attach this to it. So it's basically like a 1 cost 1/1, but it's also an equipment. And you know, if the token dies, it leaves behind the equipment, or you can just move the equipment around. So yeah, it's pretty good for this deck. Next we have the Golem Skin Gauntlets. This can actually add up quite a bit and do a lot of damage. It says equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each equipment attached to it. So it really like feels into this Voltron style. We're gonna equip a whole bunch of equipment to one dude and just punch him really hard. And it's equip cost of 2. Next we have Masterwork of Ingenuity. I really like this one. It's just a 1-drop, and it says you can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any equipment on the battlefield. So not just any equipment you own, you can choose your opponent's equipment too if they have any good ones. And then finally for the 1-drops we have Basilisk Collar. This is pretty simple but also pretty good. Equipped creature gets Death Touch and Lifelink with an equip cost of 2. Alright, next up we have our 2-drops. This is where things get a little bit more spicy. We're kicking off with Lightning Greaves. You probably already know what this does. Equipped creature gets haste and can't be the target of spells or abilities. So it basically gains haste and Shroud is what it's called. I was going to call it Hexproof. That is not what Hexproof is. And it's equip cost of 0. So fantastic. Next we have Swiftfoot Boots. Very similar to the Lightning Greaves. Equipped creature gets Hexproof and Haste, and has a equip cost of 1. We have Umezawa's Jite, one of the most infamous equipment cards ever made. This card kind of does a lot, and it is fantastic. It's not as good as in Commander, but it's still really good. It says whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage, put 2 charge counters. And that's like any kind of combat damage, not combat damage to a player, not combat damage to a creature, just any kind of combat damage, and you put the counters on the Jite, not the creature. And it says remove a charge counter from Umezawa's Jite. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, or the equipped creature gets target creature gets -1/-1, or you gain 2 life. And it's a equip cost of 2. So it makes combat math horrible because you can give things -1/-1. You can give things +2/+2, and you can just gain some life if you need to. Next up we have another new one, Black Blade Reforged. This is a legendary artifact equipment. It says equipped creature you control gets +1/+1 for each land you control. That is huge. You can just kill someone straight out with this equipped onto Sram with commander damage. And it says equipped legendary creature for a cost of 3, or you can just equip to any creature for 7, which is kind of a bummer, but we want to equip Sram with this. So that 3 cost is pretty nice. Next we have Sword of the Animus. This is another pretty popular commander equipment. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever the equipped creature attacks, just flat out attacks, no matter what happens to it, you may search your library for a basic land, put it into the battlefield tap, and shuffle your library with an equip cost of 2. Pretty good. And then finally for the 2-drops, we have Imperial Plate. This is, one of my favorite ones from back in the day. It just says equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand. So if you can keep a full hand, and well, we can because we're going to be drawing a lot of cards with Sram, then you can make the creature quite big. And it has equip cost of 2, which is nice. Alright, next up we have our 3 and higher drops for equipment, because, we don't have a whole lot of those. We tend to focus on the low drops with this deck, keep our curve slim. So, this is Darksteel Plate. It says Darksteel Plate is indestructible, equipped creature is indestructible, and it has an equip cost of 2. This card is fantastic. And it only costs 3 to play, which is, makes it even better. Next up we have Loxodon Warhammer. It says equipped creature gets +3/+0 and trample, and whenever this creature deals damage, you gain that much life, and that actually stacks on top of lifelink, which is excellent. It has a cost of 3 and an equip cost of 3. And next up we have another hammer with Hammer of Nazan. This is a really sweet one from Commander 2017. It says, whenever Hammer of Nazan or another equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control. That is excellent. That is incredibly good. And it says, whenever equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has indestructible, which is also incredibly good. And then it also has an equip cost of 4. But, when you play it, you can immediately equip it, which is excellent. This card's fantastic. And then finally for our equipment we have the classic Batter Skull. This is another living weapon, so I'm not going to go over that. It costs 5. Equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has vigilance and lifelink. And it's equip cost of 5, and you can pay 3 to return it to your hand. So the turn you play it, it itself is a 4/4 vigilance lifelink that you can kind of move that around. Battle Skull is awesome. Alright, so those were the equipments. Let's talk about the vehicles, and by vehicles I mean the only vehicle I run, and that is Smuggler's Copter, good old looter scooter. This is a 3/3 flying. It's an artifact vehicle. It only costs 2 to play. It has a crew cost of 1, which is excellent. And it says, whenever Smuggler's Copter attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. This card is fantastic. Not much else needs to be said. And next up, we have our auras. So we're going to start off with one of the most annoying cards in the whole deck, and this card I think is a must-have for any SRAM deck. It is Flickering Ward. It says, when you play for Flickering Ward, choose a color. Enchanted creature gains protection from the chosen color. And then you can pay a white and return it to your hand, and it only costs 1 white to play. So you can basically play it and then return it to your hand, and then play it and then return it to your hand multiple times, and draw a card every single time that happens, because, you get a draw card whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell with SRAM. So this is a really good draw engine with SRAM. But it's also really good just to make him unblockable, and just to make your creatures generally a pain in the butt to deal with. Flickering Ward is fantastic. Next we have Darksteel Mutation. This is a really good removal spell for the deck. Darksteel Mutation is an enchantment aura for 1 of any and a white, and it says enchant creature. Enchanted creature is a 0/1 insect artifact creature with indestructible and loses all abilities. This card is a incredibly good way to basically remove your opponent's commander. You can put this on their commander and they have a really hard way of getting it back. They basically need some way to put it in their hand, or sacrifice the creature, or do some removal. They can't just like chump block. It's a lot better than like a pacify or something. So yeah, Darksteel Mutation is really, really good. Next up we have another all-star for the deck. This is Spirit Mantle. So this costs 1 of any and a white. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has protection from creatures, which means it can't be blocked, targeted, or dealt damage by creatures, so you make your dude unblockable. This is a really good finisher for the deck, because you can slap this on your Voltron commander and then just smack him and kill him with commander damage. Really, really good. And then finally, we have one of my favorite auras ever made, with Angelic Destiny, with gorgeous artwork. Once again, one of my favorites. This is a 4-drop, 2 of any, 2 white, enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +4/+4, has flying and first strike, and is an angel, in addition to its other types. And it also says, when an enchanted creature dies, return Angelic Destiny to its owner's hand. So you can just keep playing this if your creatures keep dying. Fantastic card. It's kind of an expensive card. Not super expensive, but it kind of creeps up there because it's so cool. Next up, we're going to talk about our mana rocks, and I run Sol Ring. And that's it. Moving on. Alright, creature time. We're going to kick it off with a Mother of Runes. This card is awesome. I mean, any of you Vintage or Legacy players knows how cool this card is, or maybe in Cube. Anyway, it's a 1/1 for 1 human cleric. You can tap it and give target creature you control protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. This makes many things very hard to do for your opponent if you have this untapped. Makes it really hard for them to do spot removal or to block or just anything. Mother Rims is fantastic in a Voltron deck. Next up, you have a really broken card for Commander with Sarah Ascendant. He is a 1/1 lifelink for 1, but he also gets +5/+5 and has flying if you have 30 or more life. And guess what life you start out with, Commander? Yeah, that's right, you start out with 40 life. So if you play this guy on turn 1, he's a 6/6 flying lifelink on turn 1. He's kind of unfair for Commander, but I'm trying to be competitive, a little bit more competitive with this deck, and I think that is okay if you go into your play group saying you're gonna play with some spicy stuff. Next up, I have another one of our recursion cards with Restoration Specialist. This is a 2/1 creature dwarf artificer for 1 of any and a white, and you can pay a white and sack it to return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, and up to 1 enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can either bring back an artifact or an enchantment, or an artifact and an enchantment. It's really cool. It's basically like a 2-for-1 that you can get back from your graveyard, or that you can use to get things back from your graveyard, and yeah, it's really sweet. Next up, we have another classic with Stoneforge Mystic with, this fantastic promo art. As you can see, I do like to bling my decks out a little bit, and I really, really love this promo art. Anyway, Stoneforge Mystic, if you don't know what it does, it is a 1/2 for 1 of any and a white. Core Artificer, when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then you can pay 1 of any and a white and tap it and put in equipment from your hand onto the battlefield. That nothing needs to be said about this. It is fantastic card, bannable card, basically. Not for Commander, but for other formats. Next up, I run a couple Hate Bear cards. We're going to start off with Grand Abolisher. This dude is a 2/2 Human Cleric for 2 white. He says, during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So basically, during your turn, your opponent can't do a whole lot, which is really good. Lets you equip your dudes, move your artifacts around, like it moves your equipment around without having to worry about them killing your guy. And also makes combat very hard for your opponent because they can't play instants. So yeah, Grand Abolisher, fantastic. Similarly fantastic, we have Aethersworn Canonist. This is an artifact creature, human cleric for 1 of any and a white. It's a 2/2. It says each player who has cast a non-artifact spell this turn can't cast additional non-artifact spells. And we do run a good number of non-artifact spells. We also run a ton of artifacts. As you can see, we had a lot of equipment, a lot more than auras. And honestly, this card is definitely going to hose our opponents more than us, unless our opponents are also running an artifact deck. Next up, we have one of the, I don't want to say the silliest arts in this set. I don't know. There's just something about this art that just looks kind of goofy. But this is Leonin Shikari. It's a fantastic card. It is a 2/2 cat soldier for 1 of any and a white. And it says you may play equip abilities anytime you can play an instant. So you can move that Lightning Greaves around at instant speed, which is awesome. Yeah, Leonin Shikari is super good, obviously, for this deck. Puresteel Paladin is basically a second Sram with bonuses. He is a 2/2 Human Knight for 2 white. He says whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So you only get to draw a card for equipment, and only when it enters the battlefield. Sram is on cast, and Sram also does vehicles and auras, but he also says Metalcraft. Equipment you control have equipped 0 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. So yeah, that is just a flat-out amazing ability, being able to suit up all your guys for free. Next up, we have a pretty powerful defensive card with Scrap Trawler. Scrap Trawler is a 3/2 for 3 artifact creature construct. Whenever Scrap Trawler or another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact card in your graveyard with a lesser converted mana cost. So whenever someone blows up one of your artifacts, you can get another artifact back, which is super sweet. And we do run a lot of low-costing artifacts, as you saw at the beginning of the video, so we will probably be able to get something back. Next up, we have Heliod's Pilgrim. I really like this card for this deck. Basically, it's a 1/2 for 2 of any and a white. It is a creature, human cleric, and it says when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an aura card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So you can get a pump type aura with this. You can get a removal type aura with this. Go get like Darksteel Mutation. This card's sweet. It's kind of like lets you access your aura toolbox, which I think is great. And it has pretty cool art too. Next up, I have an impossible to read Aven Mind Sensor. And if you don't know what this is, it is a 2/1 flying bird wizard for 2 of any and a white. It has flash, and it says if an opponent would search a library, that player searches the top 4 cards of the library instead. And since we're mono white, we're not running any fetch lands. If your opponent's running fetch lands, this makes it really hard to fetch certain things. poses over like a lot of black decks with Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, all that kind of stuff. It's just another really solid hate bear. And next we're going to start the suite of creatures that reduce the cost of our spells with Danitha Capuchin, I think that's how you say it, Capuchin? Danitha Capuchin Paragon. She is a 2/2 for 2 of any and a white legendary creature, human knight. First strike, vigilance, lifelink. That's actually pretty good right there. And it says aura and equipment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This card is amazing. I can see you running this as a commander in her own right, but Sram is a lot better because, Sram lets you draw cards. But she's also really good, and you can suit her up, and she's like a house. Next we have the Foundry Inspector, not quite as good as Danitha there, but this is a 3/2 for 3 artifact creature construct. It just says artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, which is super sweet. And then we also have Joyra's Familiar, which is a 2/2 artifact creature bird for 4 mana. It has flying. It says historic spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And historic spells are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. And we do have artifacts and legendaries in the deck, including, our commander. Next up, we have a pretty sweet card that helps protect our artifacts with the Indomitable Archangel. This is a 4/4 flying for 2 of any and 2 white, and that's, not too bad in and of itself. But it also has Metalcraft. Artifacts you control have Shroud, as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. So she just kind of protects all of our artifacts, and she also has really cool art. And then finally for the creatures, we have good old Sun Titan. I love this guy. I like putting this guy in almost any deck I can. He is a 6/6 vigilance for 4 of any and 2 white. He says, whenever Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can get back, lands. You can get back your Strip Mine, which I am running in the deck. You can get back just any random dude that has died, or any artifact, or any enchantment, or anything. Sun Titan's just awesome. Yeah, he's great. Alright, next up we have the removal for our deck, because every commander deck needs some removal. This is Grasp of Fate. This is an enchantment. It's a fantastic card. I don't think it sees enough play, honestly. It costs 1 of any and 2 white, and it says, when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. So this basically Oblivion Rings 1 of each of your opponent's stuff. That is super cool. I mean, it's just super cool. It's really fair. Doesn't really, you don't really make a lot of enemies this way. You can just be like, hey guys, I have to get 1 of all your stuff. They can still get angry that you got their stuff, but I still think it's a really good one. We next have Elspeth, Sun's Champion. This is one of my favorite planeswalkers. I mean, the card and also the character, which is why I had to splurge and get a foil copy of her. But what she does is she creates dudes and she blows dudes up. She is a 6-drop planeswalker, 4 of any and 2 white. She has 4 loyalty, planeswalker Elspeth. Her +1, you get to put 3 1/1 white soldier tokens onto the battlefield, which is actually pretty good because they gum up the field and also are bodies that you can equip your equipment to. She has a -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, which actually doesn't hit a lot of our guys unless they're equipped. And she also says, you gain an emblem with creatures you control gain +2/+2 and have flying, which is pretty sweet, but we almost never get up to that -7. Elspeth is fantastic. And now we have some of the more common removal. We have Swords to Plowshares, just an iconic removal spell. I'm not really going to go into it. You probably already know what it does, or you can read it here. We also have Path to Exile, same kind of thing. Iconic removal spell, you probably know what it does, so I'm really not going to delve deep into it. Next we have a Wrath of God. Just royal creatures, can't be regenerated, just fantastic board-wide spell, just the classic. We have Day of Judgment. Same thing as Wrath of God, except the creatures can be regenerated. Then we have Fumigate, a newer Wrath spell, but a really good one in my opinion. Destroy all creatures, then you gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way, and that is definitely worth the extra mana. And then finally we have Austere Command, which is also fantastic and probably underplayed as well. Costs 6 mana, 4 of any, 2 white. Sorcery, choose 2. You can destroy all artifacts, or destroy all enchantments, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater, or any combination of 2 of those, which is fantastic. And now we have some cards with some kind of unique abilities. I probably could have included Smothering Tithe with my little, Soul Ring ramp part, but this card is amazing. I would highly recommend any white deck play this, especially a mono white deck. It's an enchantment, 3 of any, 1 white. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If they don't, you get a colorless treasure artifact creature token with tap it, sack it at 1 mana of any color. This is a fantastic ramp spell for Sram. And, you know, people like to draw cards in EDH, and this card is going to get you a lot of mana. We also have Mirage Mirror, just another fantastic EDH card. 3 of any artifact, you can pay 2 of any, and it becomes a copy of target artifact, creature, or enchantment, or land until end of turn. But it doesn't retain the ability, so once you choose it, it stays that for the whole turn. But it's super sweet. You can choose your best thing, your opponent's best thing. It's fantastic. Next we have an all-star in this deck, and once again, this is a must-have for Sram. This is Sigarda's Aid. This is an enchantment for 1 white. It says you may cast aura and equipment spells as though they had flash, and it says whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. So it kind of has that Hammer of Nizan ability, or rather Hammer of Nizan has this ability. In any case, absolutely fantastic. 1-drop, probably one of the best turn 1 plays you can do in the whole deck, other than maybe like a Soul Ring or something. Sigarda's Aid is bonkers. You need it if you're playing Sram. And then finally we have Faith's Reward, one of the ways we have to protect our board. It's a instant, 3 of any, 1 white. It says return to the battlefield all permanent cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So this really just protects you from board wipes. It's fantastic. Not much else to say. You should probably be running Faith's Reward. Alright, and finally we have our lands. We're going to start off with the lands that have to do with artifacts, or are themselves artifacts. So Inventor's Sphere is a legendary land at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. That's cool, but, you know, not a big deal. You can tap it and to add 1 colorless. You can tap 4 and tap it, sack it, search your library for an artifact, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. You can only activate this if you control 3 or more artifacts. So yeah, this land tutors for artifacts, which is awesome. This is a card that's really good to get back with, like, you know, our Sun Titan, so you can keep searching for stuff. Inventor's Sphere is fantastic, and it doesn't even come into play tapped, which is awesome. Buried Ruin is equally fantastic, but in a different way. It just comes into play untapped. You can tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can pay 2 of any and tap it and sack it, and return a artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Super good. Just return, really good recursion card. Similarly, Haunted Fengraf, another underrated commander card. You can tap it, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, tap 3 and tap it, sack it, and return a creature card at random from our graveyard to our hand. We don't have a whole lot of creature cards, so the ones that we get back are going to generally be pretty high quality. Next we have Blink Moth Nexus. This is one of the 2 lands that can turn into artifacts that we have in our deck, at least. You can tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can pay 1 mana of any color, and he becomes a 1/1 Blink Moth artifact creature with flying until end of turn. It's also still a land. And then you can pay 1 of any, and then tap it, and a Blink Moth gets +1/+1. It's just a really good, you know, if someone board wipes all creatures, you can just turn this into a 1/1 flyer, suit up all your equipment onto him, and still kill someone. Just really good. Same thing with Mishra's Factory, but in a different way. It's basically the same card, except it becomes a 2/2 assembly worker instead of a Blink Moth. You probably already know what it does, but yeah. 2/2 with not flying instead of a 1/1 with flying. Next up we have our 2 artifact lands. We have Ancient Den, which is an artifact land that makes white, and Darksteel Citadel, which is an artifact land that's indestructible and adds colorless. So yeah, just kind of no-brainers for our artifact deck. Next up we have our lands that blow up other lands with Strip Mine. You know, you can tap it, add colorless mana, tap it, sack it, blow up a land. Pretty good. Ghost Quarter, same deal, except when you destroy a land, your opponent gets to search their deck for a basic land to put on the battlefield. Some people don't run basics in their commander deck, so you can kind of get them with this sometimes. And then Field of Ruin, a newer one, but some people think it's maybe a little bit better than Ghost Quarter. You can pay 2 of any and tap it and sack it to destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. Each player searches his or her library for a basic land card, then put it on the battlefield, and then they shuffle their library. And it's not on the battlefield tapped either. Everyone just gets a basic land, which is pretty sweet. Next up I run Myriad Landscape. It's kind of a must-have for a monocolored deck in Commander, in my opinion. Enters tapped. You can tap it and add 1 colorless to your mana pool, and you can pay 2 and tap it and sack it, and you can search your library for 2 basic land cards that share a land type. Spoilers, we're getting plains. Put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. And next up we have what I call my toolbox lands. You know, lands that kind of have effects other than making mana or getting mana or blowing up lands. So first of all, we have Arcane Lighthouse. You can tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can also pay 1 mana of any color and tap it. And until end of turn, creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud, and can't have Hexproof and Shroud. It kind of randomly hoses over other Voltron decks and any other decks that just happen to be running a lot of annoying hexproof and or shroud creatures, or people who just run, swift boot boots in every deck, which is a lot of people. Now we have Rogue's Passage, kind of the finisher, honestly. You can tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can tap 4 and tap it and give a creature unblockable until end of turn. Yep, just make your Sram unblockable and smack him for a whole bunch. Next up, we have a personal favorite with Kil'jaeden Outpost. This is a kind of old school, weird one. If you haven't been playing Magic for a long time, you might not know what this does. When it enters the battlefield, you get to sacrifice a plains or bury Kil'jaeden Outpost. You basically have to sacrifice a plains or you have to destroy this card. You can tap it and add a white mana to your mana pool. So it does not come into play tapped, so you can immediately tap it when it comes into play. Or you can tap one of any and a white and tap it and put a 1/1 soldier token into play. So this land basically just makes 1/1 soldiers, which is, once again, amazing with this deck because we're going to have a lot of, equipment just sitting around if people board wipe. So we can just make a 1/1 token, suit it up, give it haste with one of our haste equipment, and then just smack our opponent again. So just a fantastic card. And finally, we have Core Haven. This is a legendary land. You can tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can tap it and a white and 1 of any and prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by a target attacking creature this turn. So it's kind of like Amazivith, except it doesn't untap the creature. This is just, once again, a really, really good one for a white deck. And finally, we have your basic planes. 19 of them. And that was my Sram Senior Edificer EDH Voltron equipment style deck, whatever you want to call it. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you liked my build. Please share with me down below, your variations of Sram. Do you guys like to run more auras, or do you like to run more vehicles? I think this deck can go a lot of different ways. I just like to do the, armory equipment style build, and, Sram is a pretty cool dude. Also, please let me know what kind of decks you would like to see in the future. I do already have some planned, but, I will also take suggestions. Spoilers, I have one from Ravnica Allegiance coming up. He's a big, scary, fiery bro. But in any case, maybe like, comment, and or subscribe. All that stuff really helps. This channel is still puny, and it really can use all the help it can get. Thank you very much for watching, guys. And I hope to see you next time for some more Magic the Gathering content. Especially for Commander. I'll see you then.